Father, I just ask that you would bless each person in this room with your presence, with your truth, with your word, Lord, in spite of me. I pray that you would make this moment worth their time as they start this day off, start this year off by giving themselves over to you. In Jesus' name, amen. About 10 years ago or so, these stickers started appearing on different kinds of cars. Runners knew what they meant. It was just sort of claiming what you'd done. The 26.2, of course, referred to a marathon. Somebody had run 26.2 miles. And then after a few years, you started to see 13.1, people saying, well, I've run half a marathon. And then more recently, I'd say in the last 5 or 6 years, you started to see these stickers. 140.6, they're up in it. These are those crazy people that ignore their families and do triathlons, swim, biking, and running 140.6 miles a day. And then they have the half triathlon, 70.3 miles. It's not really half of anything when you're going that far. I was in a running store, not just a general store, not just a hardware store. It was a running store, and I saw these stickers, and I was curious what one sold the most. My guess was 13.1. I couldn't imagine there were a lot of people who went 140.6. If they would, I suppose they'd want the sticker on their car to tell everybody that. But I assumed it was 13.1, so I asked this guy in a running store what they sold most of. And he just looked at me and he laughed. He goes, none of these four. And he pointed to this one that's coming up right now. 0.0. And there's just this pushback in our human nature where somebody can say, all right, you can tell me how far you run in a single day. I'll tell you how far I don't. And we think it's funny and we kind of push back, but it's that natural tendency that makes me to believe a lot of you aren't going to like this sermon very much. You're going to think this isn't the best way to start the new year. But I was asked to talk on this. I addressed it last year at 9:30. They wanted me to come back to it here. And here's what the thought is, that body care, what we eat and how active we are, is an aspect of Christian discipleship and worship. I hope you see that this is not trying to make you feel guilty on the first day of the year. It really is about pursuing a new freedom. In 2017, we're getting into David Ramsey and financial freedom next week, but we want to talk this first week about pursuing a new freedom. I like the way that Paul talks about it. It's 2 Corinthians 7:1. This would be a fantastic verse for the start of the year when he says this, with promises like this to pull us on, dear friends, let's make a clean break with everything that defiles or distracts us, both within and without. Let's make our entire lives fit and holy temples for the worship of God. Is there a better aim for 2017 that all of me I want to offer as a vessel of worship for God? We're in a church where the leadership has stressed this. Over a decade ago, Dr. Young, our senior pastor, wrote 2 books with physicians. One, Heart Health for Men, and then one with physicians and his wife, Heart Health for Women, where it was sort of unusual for this Baptist pastor to suddenly be saying, it's not just about reaching people's heads to convince them and their souls to save them, but we have to talk about how we care for our bodies. And 3 decades ago, he launched what we know as a Family Life Center, which is basically unheard of at the time. He was a pioneer in saying the church needs to care for the whole person. Now, it can be a little intimidating being on the teaching team when they have those high standards. Some of you may remember Dave Riggle. He's not around here much anymore because he's a teaching team pastor out at 1463, but he was around here a lot more the first couple years we were here, and then he went over there. He just completely changed how he ate a couple years ago and changed everything. And the first time Lisa and I had seen him had been a number of months. We got into the car and Lisa looked at me and she goes, wow. I said, what? She goes, Second has to be the only Baptist church in the nation where you're now the fattest member of the teaching team. But is it okay for a pastor to preach on something that he says, you know what, this isn't something I'm mastering. I'm not just preaching at you saying, be just like me. I think it's okay to say, you know, this is an issue where I want to hear this sermon once a year, frankly. I need to be reminded at the start of the year that part of being faithful to God is being faithful in this area. It's the way the Apostle Paul addressed it when he said in Philippians 3:12-14, not that I've already obtained it, or have already become perfect, but I press on so that I may lay hold of that for which also I was laid hold of by Christ Jesus. Brethren, I do not regard myself as having laid hold of it yet. But one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind, 2016, 2015, 2014, all those decisions, those are behind me. And now I'm reaching forward to what lies ahead. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. When we are worshiping, what I fear in preaching a sermon like this is that you'll miss what I'm about to say next, because this is so key to have a spiritually healthy response to this. When we talk about body care from a biblical perspective, there is a huge difference between God's approach and Hollywood's approach. They're not even close to the same. God's approach is about us embracing the abundant life. Hollywood's approach is about obtaining an artificial shape. And we're not talking about that at all. We're not saying there's a particularly holy shape. God doesn't create bodies the same. And if we don't stress that, we can do great damage to people instead of encouragement. A year or two ago, I was talking with a young woman who had been a Houston Texans cheerleader. She's dealing with some issues in her life, and she mentioned that she didn't make it the next year that she applied because, she told me, they said she was too thick. Now, looking at her as the husband of a wife, as the father of two 20-something daughters, I can't tell you how angry it made me to hear that, because she looked perfectly healthy to me. But apparently, if you want to be a cheerleader for the Houston Texans, you better be able to slide under a door wearing a winter coat or be considered too thick to have that position. And we have to realize, it might be a little funny, but we do violence to women. We do psychological violence when we suggest that all people are created alike. And it's so sad, because then women go at war with something that God created to be received with thanksgiving. Our food that's to nurture us, to be an aspect of his love for us. What's so sad, when you go back to biblical times, women feared leprosy more than anything. That was the great fear. Women didn't want to get leprosy. In the medieval times, it was the Black Plague. Please don't let me get the Black Plague. About 100 years ago, it was polio. No woman wanted to get polio. Today, women pretty much just fear bread. It's changed so much. So we have to look for an entirely different motivation, and that motivation is found in Romans 12:1, when the Apostle Paul says this: offer your bodies as living sacrifices, not just your souls, not just your minds. Offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, which is your spiritual worship. Not just singing songs. What we do after this service is part of our spiritual worship. Now, that's also an encouragement for those of us that feel like maybe you can never please the world. You'll never have the type of body the world says you should have or that it finds most appealing. Maybe you feel like you can never please your spouse. Maybe you can never please yourself. Maybe you just really don't like mirrors. But Paul says when we offer our bodies to God, here I am, this is what I have, I give it to you. He says it's not only acceptable, it's pleasing to God. The only one that matters in this universe when all is said and done says he accepts and he's pleased by our bodies if we just simply offer them to him. Because our holiness from a biblical perspective doesn't rest on the shape of my body or your body. It rests on the sacrifice of Jesus Christ's body for us. It's so key. Losing 20 pounds doesn't make God love you more. Gaining 20 pounds doesn't make God love you any less, because the reality is some of us need to lose weight, some of us need to gain weight. That's an entirely different issue. But all of us need to offer the bodies we have right now, this day, to God, and they instantly become pleasing to him. In other words, the motivation is this. Here's what happens. We treat our bodies as instruments, not as ornaments. The world is about creating this ornament that people can look at and admire. From a biblical perspective, is how do I give this body to God as his instrument for his use and his purpose? Motivation is everything. If you want 2017 to be different, your motivation will determine everything. You know, because you've made resolutions so many years before, and how well did that work for you? But why you're doing something determines what happens when you get there. Why do people move to Houston? 9 out of 10 times when somebody tells me they're new to Houston, I ask them why. It's almost always related to a job. People come to Houston because they want to get a job. Why do people go to Waco? Probably because they're going to Baylor. I don't know any other reason you would go to Waco unless you're going to Baylor. Sorry to the Gaines, but what they don't tell you in that show is that if you fix up or buy a house, then you have to live there, right? I mean, that's the part of the show they never show. Why do you go to Austin? You want to get your freak on. You want to be a little bit weird, all right? So you go to Austin. Why do people go to Dallas? Number one reason that people go to Dallas, they got bad directions. Sorry. Little Houstonian humor there. So motivation is everything. Why do you want to address this in your life? Because if we're not careful, we can trade sins for sins. A lot of times when I make resolutions, well, I want to feel better and I want to look better. And so I'm trying to fight gluttony, overeating, or sloth, not exercising, with selfishness and vanity. And all I'm doing is trading sins. That's not offering a pure sacrifice to God. I have to look at this motivation. For us, we pursue an abundant life of service, joy, and worship. That's what this is about. And it leads us to the spiritual challenge. See, we usually have one aspect of this. The exercise part has never been that difficult for me because I'm one of those crazy people. I've loved to run my entire life. And for a lot of my life, doing marathons covered up a lot of food errors. And I got away with it. But once I moved to Houston, age and genes caught up to me, all right? You have the body you're born with. And then they put me in the worship suite. And apparently, musical people like to eat a lot. I mean, they just dump calories in that kitchen every day. They had this big box of chocolate-covered macadamia nuts, and I just love those things. But did you know macadamia nuts have more calories and fat than any other nut in the world? That's why we cover them in chocolate, right? I mean, that's the United States way of dealing with it. And so with this, I discovered a new spiritual challenge, and here's what you're gonna have to face if you wanna address this in 2017. Let's say you hear this and you get a little bit convicted. All right, I see these scriptures, I think it's true. And so you decide this next week, you're gonna get out the door, you're gonna get into the gym a few times a week. You're gonna watch, maybe you cut out a couple desserts, you cut down the portions or whatever you think you need to do. And you spend the whole week doing that. At the end of this week, next Sunday, do your clothes fit any better? Probably not. Do you feel more energy? It may not be likely, it's just been 1 week. And that whole week, your roommate has been laughing at you. Okay, you don't want that dessert? Hand it over here. You're gonna go out for a run? Great, I'm just gonna sit here and eat potato chips on the couch. Tell me how it went when you got back. At the end of the week, do their clothes fit any worse? Probably not, it's just been a week. Do they have any less energy? Nah, I wouldn't think so, it hasn't been that long. And that's the real spiritual challenge. Now, if you take the trajectory over the course of a year, there might be a huge difference. But here's the spiritual challenge. Body care requires immediate sacrifice for delayed rewards. Indulgence has immediate benefits and delayed consequences. See, that's our challenge. We have to be faithful without seeing any benefit. And if we give in, we don't see any curse. And so it's so easy to say, well, this doesn't matter. I'm not going to really listen to these scriptures. But it's the course of our life. It's the same thing with our finances. It's the same thing with parenting. It's the same thing with evangelism. It's the same thing with our vocation, learning to do the work and to be faithful, even if you don't see the results. It builds us into the kind of person that God can use in every arena of life. Not just how our physical bodies operate, but our minds, our hearts, our service to God in every area. Obedience doesn't always show. And because it doesn't always show, a lot of us just give up. We don't engage in the struggle and we start coping. In fact, this may be the line that some of you need to hear more than anything else in this entire sermon. Instead of pursuing the abundant life, we settle for the just get through it life. Didn't you do that? We stop pursuing the abundant life. We say, I'm just going to pursue the get through it life. I had a friend in Bellingham, Washington, where we used to live. He was a doctor, and he had one patient who had all of the symptoms, not just a little overweight, but very heavily overweight. He was smoking, didn't exercise at all, and my doctor finally got upset with him, saying, look, I don't want to keep treating the symptoms. I think it's irresponsible as a doctor to just treat the symptoms if we don't deal with some of the causes. I want to talk to you about your smoking. As a doctor, I have a stressful job. It helps me focus during the day. I kind of go from cigarette break to cigarette break. Let's not deal with the cigarettes right now. It's okay, how about the weight? Well, fine, as long as you let me have the nightly bowl of ice cream. It's sort of my reward. I work hard throughout the day, and so I need to have that. He goes, okay, let's talk about you getting some exercise. You don't understand, doctor. I work 12 to 14 hours. I come home. It's dark. It's rainy. This was up in Washington State. I just don't know that that's realistic. And then my friend, the doctor, looked at him and said, then you need to prepare to die. He goes, I can't keep treating these symptoms because these little decisions that are getting you through the day are actually shortening your years. And that's the difference between pursuing the abundant life or the just get through it life. He's just coping with his problems. He's not dealing with them. His life is out of balance. And these little things that seem to get him through the day are shortening his life. About a month or two ago, my youngest daughter, who enjoys an occasional glass of wine, you'll find out why that's important when I say that, sent me an article on women who are getting out of control with wine. It's almost become this romantic culture of women with wine and their love affair with wine. And one woman who wrote this article, I don't think she had any religious motivation or any faith-based reason to address it in her life. It seemed to me it was more just something physical, just decided that she would stop for a while to see what it was like. And it made her sensitive to how women put up with a lot of things they shouldn't put up with, because they have wine to lubricate the consequences and to help them deal with a life that is out of control. Here's one of the things she said. One day that summer, I'm wearing unwise but cute, so cute shoes and trip at the farmer's market, cracking my phone, blood staining the knees of my favorite jeans and scraping both my palms. Naturally, I post about it on Facebook as soon as I've dusted myself off. 3 women who don't know I'm sober comment quickly, wine, immediately. Do they sell wine there? Definitely wine, and maybe new shoes. She said, I began to wonder, has it been more than an occasional delight in my life, or has it become a seeming necessity to deal with the messed up world? And is that the best way to deal with the messed up world? Here's what she said. Maybe women are so busy faking it to be more like a man at work, more like a porn star in bed, more like 30 at 50, that we don't trust our natural responses anymore. Maybe all that wine is an Instagram filter that for our own lives, maybe all that wine is an Instagram filter for our own lives, so we don't see how sallow and cracked they've become. She went to a card shop to pick out some cards for a friend, and she was struck by how they all romanticized that wine. Wine is to women as duct tape is to men. It fixes everything. I make wine disappear. What's your superpower? Lord, give me coffee to change the things I can and wine to accept the things I cannot. And here's the question she asked. If I need wine to get through the day, maybe I need to change my day. Maybe I need to have a conversation with my husband. Look, this isn't working for me. It's out of bounds. You put too much on my shoulders, and the only way I can get through it at the end of the day is to make myself forget the stress I live under. We need to make some changes in our family so I don't need that to just cope. I don't want to just get through my day. I want the abundant life. Maybe you have to have an honest, painful conversation with your employer. Maybe you have to find a new place of employment. But her point was, if you have to do that at the end of the day to cope, maybe you should change your day instead of cope. And it's not wine. I don't mean to be picking on wine. It could be 10 cups of coffee. Maybe you're not getting the sleep you need and you need 10 cups of coffee to get through the day. Maybe you need 10 Diet Cokes. I don't know what it is that you're doing, but the whole issue is the abundant life is saying, how do I prosper in 2017 instead of make myself forget it every evening and every weekend? See, medicating the pain instead of addressing the cause of pain is always a short-term solution that leads to long-term problems and very often addictions. There's a huge difference. Doctors numb us to fix the problem, and that's a good thing. Sometimes we need to be numb to fix the problem. But we numb ourselves to forget the problem, and that creates an even bigger problem. I'm saying don't numb yourself in 2017. If your life is out of balance, deal with the causes. The abundant life is found by addressing the cause with God, not treating the symptoms with spiritual narcotics. Now, you can't address everything in 2017. I wish I had more time. This has got to be a sermon sometime later in this year because I think it's a key point. But those that study recovery and spiritual health and whatnot have talked about how we each have an ego bucket. We think of ego as a negative word. It can be a positive word. It's your sense of self, how you can present yourself. And we have a certain bucket, and if we say no to ourselves too much, we're emptying the bucket, and at the end of the day, we can't say no any longer. You know this if you've had a habit you've tried to break. You can say no, 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 and then you get to 15 and 16, okay, finally, just to be done fighting it. So if you address one issue, for me one year it was sugar. I knew sugar had too big of a place. You learn to say no, 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 so that the next year, now it's not, once it becomes a habit, it's not emptying my ego bucket. I'm not being depleted, and I can address something else. And so what you want to look at in your life is, what do I need to address this year? Maybe I need more sleep. Maybe it's a particular food. Maybe it's a time that I eat. Maybe I'm eating for stress and dealing with the stress. Maybe it is wine. Maybe it's too much coffee. There's so many different possibilities. But I don't want you to settle for less than the abundant life. And you know why? Because your body is holy and pleasing to God, and He adores you. And you, listen to this, you cause Him great pain when you abuse yourself to get through the day. It's not about you, and it's not about your shape. More than I'm preaching this sermon to help you, I'm preaching this sermon to bring joy to God and remove a cause of great pain, because when you abuse yourself, He hurts even more. I just read this last week. It's such a powerful verse. Lamentations 4:2. Here is God crying. God is crying in this verse. It's a book of lamentations. If you want to know God's passion in heart, here it is. He says, the precious, not just my unruly kids, he goes, the precious children of Zion, worth their weight in fine gold, how they are reckoned as earthen pots. God is saying to His people, you're so valuable to me. You are worth your weight in fine gold. And you let others treat you like mass-produced pottery. You're worth so much more than that. Don't abuse yourself. Don't settle for less than I want you to have, because it breaks my heart when someone so valuable treats themselves so cheaply. You might not treat yourselves with value, but treat yourselves as God treats you, worth your weight in fine gold. And when you do that, you realize it's not about your body. It's about offering it up to God. There's an extraordinary woman named Claire Minkley. I've got a picture of her. She isn't really known in the U.S. She was born up in Canada. She had a genetic condition. It was a deletion in one of her chromosomes that caused a significant portion of her brain to develop unusually. She's very small. At age 19, she weighed just 55 pounds. Always lived in a wheelchair because really the only muscles she could control in her body were her eyes and her right hand. And so she learned to communicate using one of those boards with her eyes and her right hand, but it was very slow. It took her about an hour to get out 15 to 20 words, which means this sermon would take you all week to hear it if Claire was giving it. But she believed with this very disabled body that God had put her on this earth to learn about the mysteries of the universe and to open up the world to the mind of God. So when she was in the 5th grade, she read Stephen Hawking's famous book, A Brief History of Time, and sent him a critique, telling him where he got it wrong. And to Hawking's credit, he wrote back and he said, I see you have some of the same issues. Here's what we've learned and it's been helpful. When she entered university, she scored nearly 100% in advanced placement calculus, but catch your breath, she had to do it all in her head. She couldn't do figures. She couldn't work a calculator or a computer. She did advanced placement calculus in her head at university and got nearly 100%. But even more than her head was her heart. I spent the last month going through some of her writings. She was so spiritually alive. Here she wrote this when she was 9 years old. When you have riches hurting your soul, your riches are keeping you from reaching your goal. That's pretty good stuff for a 9-year-old. When she was 12, she almost died. They had her on life support. And she had an experience where after everybody left that night, everybody had been working furiously to keep her alive. She said, Jesus came into my mind. Do not die, he said, leave everything to me. I will look after your life. During the day, there was lots of activity, but at night, you're alone with your thoughts. I thought about all sorts of things like why my body was bringing everyone so much grief. I thought, what a precious girl. 12 years old, they're desperately working to keep her alive, and she's thinking, why does my body cause so many people to work so hard and bring so much sadness and so much grief? She's thinking about others. That's how big her heart was. But since her mind was so advanced, scientists unleashed what they called the Claire Project. Brain signals can be measured. And they thought, if we can train somebody like Claire to figure out her brain signals, she can learn to communicate when we can measure them. Can we do that so that somebody like her could talk not 15 to 20 words an hour, but basically at a normal pace if they could just figure out a way to train their brain signals? But unfortunately, Claire died rather young. She was just 19 years old when she died, and the project had to go on without her. Before she died, somebody meaning to encourage her said, Claire, you have such an incredible mind, but your body is a prison. And Claire objects. She goes, no, my body is what I have to work with. My body's not a prison. It's what God has given me to work with, to help others come to know the Lord, to worship him, to serve him, to tell others about him. And that's what this sermon is all about. Your body is what you have. It's what you've been given to work with. In 2017, maybe you have a sick body. Maybe you have an addicted mind. Maybe you have an old body. Maybe you have an Olympic athlete's body, an out of shape. I don't know, but whatever that body is, will you take a moment today? It's all right, Lord, in 2017, this is yours. I want to view myself as an instrument of worship and service. I'm not going to let limitations hold me back. I'm not going to let what was behind me, what I've done to create this kind of body, that's not going to hold me back. I'm moving forward. We go back to that wonderful verse, if we could bring it up again. 2 Corinthians 7:1. With promises like this to pull us on, dear friends, let's make a clean break with everything that defiles or distracts us, both within and without. Let's make our entire lives fit and holy temples for the worship of God. I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this right now. If you all would just close your eyes. And if you think that God is convicting you, that this is an area you want to address, I just want you to lift up both hands, just like this. Just chest level. Just saying, Lord, this body is what I have, but I give it to you. I want 2017 to be different, not just to look better or to feel better, but Lord, to really live the abundant life, to make each day count, a day of worship, a day of service, a day of helping others come to know you. I don't want to just get through it life. I want an abundant life. And so here, in a place dedicated to worship, come and fill me with your Spirit. Give me a new mind and a new heart. And let me live the abundant life. There may be some here this morning that don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about a relationship with God. You know, willpower does nothing in this. Most New Year's resolutions don't even make it into February. If you want to know the dynamism of having God as an active force in your life, one who accepts you as you are but helps you become what you've always wanted to be, we want to give you an opportunity to come forward and meet that God. And as soon as the music starts, we'd ask you to get up wherever you are, to walk forward and let us help you understand what it means to give your heart, your life, your whole body and being over to Jesus Christ. Others of you would like to give you an opportunity to join this church, to say, this is a group of people I want to serve God with as we pursue the abundant life together. You'll do the same thing. As soon as the music starts, we'll invite you to get up wherever you are, to come forward, and we'll be happy to welcome you into our fellowship. As soon as the music starts, please come.